Hey everyone, welcome to my latest Mythic Plus tanking guide. Today we're diving into Grim Batol. I recorded this guide before the upcoming dungeon nerfs in the next reset. These changes include better visibility of the Twilight Winds on Drahga Shadowburner, Abyssal Corruption targeting only 2 players instead of 3 on Erudax, and a massive 66% damage reduction to the mutated hatchlings that spawn from the boss. Along with a few other tweaks, these changes should make the dungeon a lot easier than shown in this video. Now, let's get into the guide. But before we start, if you find my videos helpful, please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to leave any remarks, questions or suggestions in the comments below. One last note, this is not a full in-depth guide to the dungeon. I'll be focusing purely on the tank mechanics to help you get started to tanking this dungeon. The most important abilities will be shown in the video, so you have a good sense of what's going on around you. For the first pull, when having fortified, I like to coordinate with the group to use Lust or Heroism, so we can combine the first pack with the big dragon on the balcony. The big dragon, the destroyer, casts Umbral Wind, an AoE ability that deals damage and causes a knockback, which can be tedious to manage on the balcony below. Pay close attention to your positioning and rotate your defensives as much as possible. The brutes also place harmful patches on the ground that the group needs to avoid, so it's important to interrupt mass tremor from the casters. Mass tremor not only deals significant damage to the group, but also slows, making it harder for everyone to dodge the stuff on the ground. The next pack also has the brutes with their ground patches and mass tremor that needs to be interrupted. Additionally, there's an Overseer, which uses a strong tank buster ability called Drive. This places a stacking debuff on you, increasing your physical damage taken by 20%. The Overseer also casts Reckless Tactic, enraging the other adds, which removes any crowd control and causes them to deal 20% more damage but also take 10% more damage. These abilities combined make this a challenging pull, so be extra mindful when managing your defensives. Since it's all physical damage, you could consider moving out of range to avoid some of the hits and clear the debuff. However, for most tanks, not being in range to attack can reduce your self-sustain, so it's a trade-off and ideally be communicated with the healer. For this pack, we've already covered their abilities. However, you need to clear them to be able to fly the dragons behind them and damage the upcoming packs. Once you mount one of the red dragons, you have 2 damaging abilities. Your 1 is a powerful AoE with 5 charges, so ideally you want to use all of them before returning. Your 2 is the ability you can spam indefinitely. What I find works best is to instruct the group to focus on the large pack near the sleeping dragon in the alcove of the hallway. This pack is in an awkward position with the patrol passing nearby, and by prioritizing it, you reduce the risk of accidental pulls, especially in pugs, and save time overall. With good timing, you can use your big 1 ability on this pack while also cleaving the patrol as it passes. Other than that, just spam as much damage as possible on all the packs you see below. In our case, we were able to kill both the patrol and the dragon pack, so we pulled the 2 smaller mobs along to the Earthcallers further up the hallway. If the patrol is still alive in your run, just combine these together. However, unless your group is overly geared for the dungeon, avoid pulling the big dragon with the knockback alongside with the patrol, especially because of the Overseer. Once the Earthcallers were nearly down, I pulled the large Overseer on the bridge to be a bit more efficient. Your run might differ, so a bit of improvisation and knowing which mob combinations you can handle will speed things up, especially since we're still working against the time. Likely, up until the first boss, it's now just cleaning up whatever leftover mobs are still alive. One important thing to note is that this pack has 2 Overseers, so be prepared for a lot of incoming damage. Ideally, these should also be nearly dead by the time you engage them. Now, for the first boss, General Umbriss, this fight isn't overly complicated. The key ability to watch out for is Commanding Roar. which summons 3 dragons that do big AoE flyovers, dividing the room into 4 lanes, of which only 1 is safe to stand in. The safe lane is telegraphed pretty clearly, so it should be easy to handle. I like to reposition the boss to the middle after each dragon flyover to minimize the distance you need to run for the next safe lane. There's also a tank buster ability called Skull Splitter, which should be mitigated as much as possible. It will leave a bleed on you that can stack, so if it can be removed, that will help quite a bit. Lastly, he casts Rock Spike on party members, leaving patches of rumbling earth on the ground. Ideally, these should be placed on the outer edges of the room to keep enough space clear for dodging between the lanes. After the boss, we'll face a different set of mobs. First up are the Twilight Beguilers. They cast Sear Mind, which should be interrupted as they deal heavy damage and stuns the target, leaving them unable to dodge any AoE around them. Next we have the large Molten Giants, which will chunk away your health with fire damage. The first ability to watch out for is Molten Wake, an AoE that applies a stacking debuff, increasing the fire damage you take by 20%. This debuff is important because of Lava Fist, a strong tank buster ability that should be mitigated. I tried avoiding it by moving out of range, but that didn't work. In hindsight, you might be able to avoid the debuff by itself by leaping away just before Molten Wake finish casting, but I haven't tested the range yet. The next pack introduces a new mob, the Twilight Flame Render. These ones cleave and apply a damage over time debuff. They also have a frontal ability called Shadow Flame Slash, so be mindful of your positioning. The next boss is Forgemaster Throngus. He uses an ability called Fiery Cleave, which targets a random group member, smashing the ground and leaving a large patch of lava behind. It's important for the group to stand between the boss and the edge of the room to bait the cleave outward, leaving enough space for movement. At some point you'll see him channel Forge Weapon again, this time forging 2 swords. This signals the tank buster mechanic called Molten Flurry. A channeled flurry of melee swings, rapidly draining your health. This one you definitely need to mitigate in order to survive. The next time he forges a weapon, it will be a massive maze. You definitely don't want to get hit by this one, so when you see him forging it, just run away. As he approaches, he is slowed and leaves growing puddles of lava behind him. This is the kite mechanic. And as you can see, I made the mistake on our first try to kite the boss diagonally and filling the whole room with lava, leaving the group no space to move and basically wiping us just before we were able to kill him. The better way to handle this is by positioning near the edge of the room and kiting him so the lava drips mostly off the edge, giving the group much more space to maneuver and finish off the boss. After the boss, or before if you did the reset thing, you'll get another not so friendly giant, surrounded by beguilers. I'd say handle with care and play the defensive game. Next we have another small pack with abilities we already know. Our priest was kind enough to CC, but I actually had them in mind for percentage. Sometimes I get mixed up and think we don't need certain packs if they get CC, but if you plan the route, stick to it unless you're completely sure about the percentage difference and how to make up for it. Miscalculating your percentage can be very costly at the end. The pack with the giant you can and probably should skip. The next pack can get a bit hectic, especially if you pull the Lava Bender, Enforcer and Flame Render together, as they have several area denial abilities going off at once. However, it mainly comes down to avoiding mechanics. Since we have a large hallway behind us, I'll pull them back to give the group enough space to move and dodge everything. I will go over each ability in the order they happen so you know what to expect. First up is Shadow Lava Blast from the Lava Bender. This is a wide beam aimed at a random party member and should be avoided. Next we have Dark Eruption, which explodes from beneath every player, and everyone should make sure to move out of these. The key ability to watch out for when tanking the Enforcer is Ramping Rage. With each melee swing he will enrage and deal 30% more damage for 3 seconds, and this effect stacks. And you should not let it stack too high. Since it's only 3 seconds, you can briefly kite him and let his stacks drop before you start tanking him again. Just make use of the hallway behind you. At 50%, the Lava Bender will cast Ascension, which triggers a big AoE that everyone needs to move out of. After that, it will deal ticking AoE damage to the group for the rest of the fight. The next pack includes Warlocks that debuff the group with healing absorbs, but from a tanking perspective it's not too difficult. Just make sure to interrupt Seer Mind from the Beguilers again. Afterwards we face another Warlock and Enforcer. I chose to play it safe here, but I think it's possible to combine them with the last pack of Warlocks if you handle mechanics well, especially if you have a decurse in the crew. Up until the next boss, you'll be dealing with packs of ads we've already covered. You'll need to kill all of them for percentage. Just avoid the ground effects and manage the Enforcer's ramping rage carefully. This is where I got confused and made the mistake of going with an unnecessary CC from the priest, skipping a pack of ads we needed for percentage and forgetting to make up for it later in the run. It ended up costing us some extra time. An important thing to note here is that you'll be facing 2 Lava Benders at the same time. Meaning if both reach 15% or below HP, at the same time the ticking damage from their Ascendance buff will likely overwhelm the healer. It is crucial to focus on killing one before bringing the other below 50%. The next boss, Drahga Shadowburner, has a pretty simple first phase. She casts Invocation of Shadow Flame, which summons a fire elemental that focuses on a random party member and moves towards them. It needs to be CC'd and killed as quickly as possible, because if it reaches its target, they'll die. The boss will keep casting this ability frequently throughout the fight, including in phase 2. In phase 2, the boss jumps onto a big dragon, Valiona. Instead of 1 fire elemental, there will now appear 2. Additionally, she will periodically cast Twilight Buffet, similar to the big dragons at the start of the dungeon, dealing damage and knocking you back. After the knockback, Twilight Winds will appear around the boss, dealing heavy damage if you get hit by them. In the upcoming reset, the visibility of these winds will be improved. To make it easier for you in the melee to avoid these winds, you could choose to move the boss to the other side of the room after they appear. Wait for her next ability, Devouring Flame, though before you move her, because Devouring Flame is the reason you want to keep the boss facing away from the group, toward the outer edges of the room. It's a huge frontal ability that is difficult to dodge if the boss is facing inwards. Once you reach the next hallway, you'll encounter a new set of mobs. Apart from dealing a lot of AoE damage, they aren't too difficult. As a tank, note that when the small hatchlings die, they apply a stacking debuff to everyone in the group that increases their shadow damage taken. While this debuff itself isn't too hard for you to handle, pulling too quickly like I did in the video can become problematic for the group due to the Corrupt ability from the Corruptor. Corrupt is a channel of heavy single target shadow damage on the random party member that the healer needs to heal through. In addition, the Corruptor casts Mind Piercer, which places purple zones on the ground. Make sure to move out of these or you'll take damage and be charmed. Note that the final pack contains 2 Corruptors, and with the debuff stacking they can chunk through your health quite quickly, so be ready with defensives. The last boss is Erudax, and upon starting the fight you will see these tentacles appearing through the room. If you get hit by these, you will get stunned, so avoid these at all costs. It will also cast Shadow Gale, basically surrounding the room with encroaching shadow that gets smaller and smaller until it leaves the group with just a small spot to stand. Once it has the group cornered, it will cast Abyssal Corruption, targeting 2 players that you will want to stay clear of. After the shadow phase is over, she will summon small hatchlings who do a lot of damage, especially with the tank buster ability incoming. After the upcoming reset, their damage will be nerfed by 66%, so it will be a lot easier to deal with these. Now the tank buster ability I mentioned is Crunch, a very hard hitting slam that will knock you back, so make sure you won't land in one of the tentacles, basically also stunning you. With the damage of the crunch, the hatchlings bashing your face, you are likely to die. The boss will keep cycling through these abilities, so it's rinse and repeat until you kill the boss. As I mentioned earlier, skipping a pack and forgetting to make up for it can be costly, and it's ultimately the tank's responsibility. In this run, we had to backtrack because it didn't account for the missing percentage, and we barely timed the key, luckily. This concludes my tanking guide for Grim Batol on Mythic Plus difficulty. If you find it helpful, please let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, so you won't miss any upcoming videos. These guides take quite some time to make, and since I'm also enjoying the game along the way, please bear with me until they come available. For now, thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.